Hey everybody, hope you're having a great day. This is Dean Meadows for another episode of Dean's Dialogue. Real quick, before we get into today's video, we'd just like to say a huge thank you to the Lake Norman Church of Christ located in Huntersville, North Carolina. Thank you for the opportunity to come and answer the question, is Christianity true, over this weekend, as we looked at the existence of God, reliability of the New Testament, and the case for the resurrection. It was an honor and a privilege. Thank you for your hospitality. Just an amazing group of people over there. So today's video is a response to a charge that I commonly see on YouTube, that I commonly hear in conversations, and even something that is quite frequent in debate between Christians and atheists. And the charge is the idea that the belief in God is some type of mental crutch, some type of coping mechanism that's used by people who struggle with adverse circumstances and situations in life. And really, the guy who laid the groundwork for this, in my opinion, is Sigmund Freud. And he wrote that religious beliefs are illusions, fulfillments of the oldest, strongest, and most urgent wishes of mankind. As we already know, the terrifying impression of helplessness in childhood aroused the need for protection through love which was provided by the Father. And the recognition that the helplessness lasts throughout life made it necessary to cling to the existence of a Father, but this time a more powerful one. Thus, the benevolent rule of a divine providence allays our fears of the dangers of life. So, what is Freud saying here? Freud's saying here that God really doesn't exist. He's just an invention of our imagination, conjured up because of our childhood need for protection and for a protector. So, based on Freud's argument here, God is a metaphysical illusion. And so, the question that I want to ask, a couple of questions that I want to ask is, number one, is Freud correct? And two, is the existence of God just for people who need help getting through the sufferings of life? Is it just a coping mechanism for humans? And so here are my two brief responses to what Freud has written and what a lot of atheists will put out there. First, Freud's argument begs the question. In other words, it assumes what it's trying to prove. It starts from the outset that God doesn't exist. And basically, what Freud is saying is that since we know God doesn't exist, there has to be some type of psychological answer for why people would hold this belief. And the problem with what Freud is saying is that before Freud can even answer that question, he has to look at whether or not there's good evidence for the existence of God. And it doesn't seem, in this particular section, he doesn't do that. It doesn't seem that he's even interested in that. It seems like he's just already presupposed that God doesn't exist. And that might be the minor objection that I have to Freud's assessment about the existence of God. The bigger objection that I have is that Freud's argument cuts both ways. If it can be argued that humans created God because of their need for security, the need for a father figure, or to cope with the troubles in life, then it can also be argued that atheism is a response to the human desire to freely do whatever one wants without moral obligations to anyone or the constraints of a father figure. It's entirely possible that the atheist does not want God to exist because they don't want to be morally accountable to him or morally accountable for the way in which they live their lives. And so why can't the theist conclude that this is atheism's version of wish fulfillment? And maybe a third objection that I have to this, and more so to the pop atheists and YouTube personalities who run this argument, is it really is disingenuous to the theist, right? It presupposes that person believes the things that they believe because they're mentally weak, or at least it seems that way. So why couldn't I say that the reason that the atheist believes or has a lack of belief in God is because they had daddy issues growing up? See, I believe that the atheist would find that to be egregious and would find that to be disingenuous to why they believe what they believe. And so my only point is that you can't do that on either side of the aisle. It doesn't make any sense, and it doesn't help the conversation move forward if, as I enter into the conversation, I automatically assume that the atheist is an atheist because they've never read their Bible. An atheist is an atheist because they don't want God to exist. An atheist is an atheist because they had family issues growing up. And I think the atheist would agree with that. So I would just ask that in return. As atheists talk to Christians, they don't presuppose that we believe in God because we need that mental crutch. And furthermore, it's not necessarily the question of why do I believe what I believe. The question is my belief true? And if it's true, then I should follow the evidence where it leads. So in conclusion, the groundwork for this popular objection, I believe, was laid by Freud. But upon closer inspection of his argument, two or three things come to mind, which I've mentioned. One, it begs the question. It assumes what it tries to prove. Two, you can run that argument both ways. And three, it's just really disingenuous to say that the Christian believes that way because they need a mental crutch to cope with life. So thank you so much for tuning in. Make sure that you leave a comment below, and you can also check us out at www.thedailyapologist.com. You can follow us at Twitter at daily_apologist. We're also on Instagram. Our handle is The Daily Apologist. And thank you so much for watching once again. Remember, equip yourself to engage culture. Have a great day, and God bless.